Well, hi, this is John Sarver, and welcome to another GLREA Zoom Thursday. And I'd just like to thank our sponsors, the State Department of EGLE, Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, McNaught and McKay, and we have Mark Furta here. And let's see, why am I Harvest Solar? Sorry. And let's see, I would like to mention too that we have two events coming up. We're going to have a virtual solar tour on Saturday, October 16th from 10 to 2 o'clock, and more information will be coming your way about that. And our annual meeting, which will again be virtual this year online, will be on Saturday, November 4th. So, put those on your calendar. And I know a lot of you are GLREA members, but if you aren't, we would love to have you join and support the efforts. And you can do that at our website, glrea.org. And we have Rob Rafson talking tonight about utility rates, which is a very important topic. It can be a little confusing at times, but Rob has been a real asset to GLREA, because along with John Richter, he is one of our kind of major two witnesses as we intervene in MPS rate cases. And that's I think at different times, John or others have mentioned how challenging that can be, because you've got literally thousands and thousands of pages in these filings with the Public Service Commission from the utility and interveners. But with that, let me turn it over to Rob. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Let me turn on my screen share and we'll get going here. Share, start the presentation. All right, can you see the presentation? Excellent. All right. I wanted to talk today about, we'll start at the very beginning and we'll talk a little bit about how, well, first, how do you get power? I mean, just to, state at the very beginning, most of our power comes from power plants, goes over transmission lines, gets into the distribution network, and it's stepped down to the voltages that we can use in our home. And that's sort of the traditional model. Now we're moving to more of a distributed generation where solar panels on your roof go through an inverter and get to usable power in your home. Most of that power hopefully is used in the home first, and if there's any excess, that flows out into the grid. That's where the utilities start to become interested in how does the power that goes onto the grid, and how do they value it, and what is it worth? By the way, at any point, if anybody's got a question about what I'm talking about, feel free to chime in and ask questions along the way. Our traditional true net metering is what basically the energy that this is what we had from 2008 until last year. We had true net metering for residential, where the power generated is either used in the home. If there's any excess, it flows out, and that same credit goes against the flow in, and therefore you can size up your system fully. Well, the utilities complained about that, and they convinced the Public Service Commission to allow what's now called the DG tariff. And the DG tariff is an instant measurement of inflow and outflow from your home. So again, the solar from your panels comes into your home and you use it first. And if there's any excess, it flows out. Right now in consumers, the outflow credit is 10 cents and your incoming power is around 18. So obviously the you can either size your system to minimize that outflow, or just accept that you're going to get a lower compensation for the excess energy. Now, there's a lot of debate about what the proper value of that outflow is, and that's been an ongoing debate. We were all hoping that the report that just came out from RAP on distributed energy really ended up just talking about the process or options for valuation, rather than really digging in and saying, this is what we think the value is. So the report was good, but more of a historical lesson rather than something that was significantly useful. I'm really more interested in looking at what are the rates now, what are they expected to go, rather than if we get further into the process of valuing solar, then we'll have more to talk about. But right now we've got the DG tariff, and so that measures inflow and outflow in two different registers in your meter. Now, on top of that, this last year, we have now a time of use rate, which all consumers' residences have been forced into. And that means that the power coming in from your solar panels offset a peak of when it's 2 to 7 in the afternoon, a peak price of 19 cents and an outflow, a non-peak of about 15 cents. About half the energy coming from a solar array is during those peak hours, and about half is not, maybe even less than half. So the outflow rate is the energy only part. So it's 12 cents during peak and it's 8 cents during non-peak. And the same thing with the purchases are at 19 and 15. So when we look at power generated by a solar array, these are the hours of the day. So from 2 to 7, you can see not really all of the power generated. Most of it actually happens during the non-peak hours. And so this is 1 in the morning. That's January through December. So a lot of it happens in the fall, summer and fall of the year. During the hours of the day, residential tends to have its peak usage in the evenings, between peaks out around 6 or 7 in the evening, and then it's pretty strong through the evening, and then tails off when everybody goes to sleep. And it's quite low in the evening. And the utilities, they have to make power for the whole grid, everybody combined. So you've got industrial and agricultural, and you've got residential, commercial peaks out in the middle of the day because they've got air conditioning loads. So it's interesting because we make rates, or the amount of cost recovery that the utilities, based upon this coincident peak, the peak that adds up all of these different usages. And you can see that if we go backwards one, the power is generated in the morning through midday, and then it tails off in the early afternoon and evening. So, but your usage is in the early evening. So you can depress or you can consume that power in the middle of the day, but there's likely that the generated power is going to end up with some outflow every day. And so that's what rates. So I went and I looked at DTEs, all of their different rates, and consumers, all of their different rate options. And so that's wrong. Sorry about that. It's not $1,000 a month, but it's $116. The reason I wanted to bring this up was that I wanted to take a average um, customer usage and see what the different rates would would be and how much money you would be charged for each of them. The top number is the price per month. Bottom one is the price per kilowatt hour as a rate. Now, what I ultimately want each of you to get out of this is that everybody should contact their um, consumers or DTE, whoever you have, and in the early part of each year, and ask them to perform an analysis of all of the different rate structures and tell you which one is best for you, especially if you have a solar array, because your usage profile will be quite different than a regular residential customer, because during the middle of the day you're not going to be using much energy at all. So every year you should just automatically go and talk to your either your rep or just call directly into consumers or DTE and ask them to run the analysis for you.
Rob,
And then,
Rob,
go ahead.
that,
Yep.
that graph that you keep going back to that has months on the y-axis,
Yep.
what is the x-axis there?
These are the hours of the day. So
Oh,
this is
okay.
1 o'clock in the morning through midnight. And
Thank you.
so this is 12. You'll notice that solar noon is a little afternoon, and that during the months of June through October, you end up with most of your solar generated for the whole year. And the light pink is basically no production. And then the dark color is the highest level of production.
Thank you.
And then in this box, the 2 to 6 or 2 to 7 is where they rate design for our now time of use rate. So this is for the utility. This is most important because it's their coincident peak. This is what they're trying to reduce so that they end up with needing less overall generation, because they have to have a power plant that can run at this level all the time, plus a reserve margin. So if they can depress this peak, they can have less generators needed and less peak. For them, they would love a nice flat, or now that they have some solar and wind, a little bit of a pump in the middle of the day, but they would prefer a dead flat load. And we're going to start seeing some of that as we get more electric cars and solar with storage, because people are going to start to move their usage to the evenings, and you're going to start charging your car, especially in this 2 to 6 in the morning time, when they have all this excess capacity for generating power, but nobody's using it. So they would love this to go up and end up in that, the time when we're all sleeping time to be generating more. We've been overall rates have been just climbing dramatically. Michigan is the most expensive power. This is even 2000. This is a few years ago, and we are even more dramatically the highest price power in the Midwest. And we're third or fourth in the country now in terms of residential rates. So, it's going to become more and more viable for us to go to put solar panels on our homes, and especially with storage, with or without with an electric vehicle. So hopefully we'll end up with something like this in the future. That's my contact information. If you have any questions, that's about all I've got to say.
So with the distributed generation rate structure that consumers has now,
Yep.
they never pay us more than, we're still better off using all of our own power, even during peak hours. They don't
Absolutely.
pay us enough during peak for us to not use that as opposed to selling it to them.
Right. I mean, your optimal thing is to use the energy you generate during the day. Absolutely. If you have access, the question is the difference between the daytime, the power you're generating during the day, and the outflow rate. So that difference in this slide is between 19 cents and the 12 cents. So does that 7 cents a kilowatt hour that you're going to increase the value, is that worth buying a battery so that you can not buy some power during the nighttime?
Dale, go ahead with your question.
So DTE's peak rate time period is from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And go back one more slide, Rob. The coincident peak there,
Yep.
where you show the coincident peak. Is the utility required to choose the time period for peak rates based on that? Or just in general, yes, they would want to reduce their peak, but why is it that DTE has 11 to 7 p.m., which is really pretty decent for solar,
Right.
where consumers has 2 to 7 p.m.?
Because for them, they're looking at this window from 11 to 7 in the evening. They want to take that whole peak out.
Yeah, but do they have to? Because
No, it's their choice to determine rates. And that they feel that that's going to be the best for them.
so do they have, is the commercial load for DTE more than it is for consumers energy? Is that why? Or is it just random? Or I'm concerned that the DTE will take away the 11 to 7 and make it like whatever 2 to 8 p.m. or 2 to 9 p.m. or something, right? Which would be worse for solar.
Yeah, I expect that there's two things that I will expect always from the utilities. One is that rates are going to change because they feel that it's to their best interest to make to change rates as often as possible, and usually increase rates at the same time. So you're going to see changes in the design of rate structures. So like here, there used to only be a general services rate, basically a kilowatt hour rate, and that was about it. Now they've got DTE has three different time of use rates, including a super peak one. And then there's smart hours, and there's all sorts of craziness that consumers is now got these several different options. So now the difference between in consumers territory, the difference between each of the different types of rates, I think, are going to result in very small differences in price per kilowatt hour. But certainly it's going to be a big difference when we start looking at energy storage and the ability to dump energy during peak periods, meaning that you just discharge your battery at the highest peak price and you end up with a much better overall income position. Is that helpful?
Yeah. So do you know anybody that's doing that with consumers? The smart rate, the smart savers or peak smart savers, it's called.
No, the problem is that the smart saver, the smart hours are like 1 hour a day, and it's not every day, and they have like it's a very complicated program. Eventually, we're going to start to see, or actually in the consumers and DTE IRPs, integrated resource plans, they are looking to the future to increase the amount of demand response. What that means is that they will actually pay you money to allow them at certain hours of the day to say turn off your air conditioner, or be able to shift your usage patterns a little bit, and actually pay you to allow them to have some control over your over your usage, their generation. And they're already talking about doing a program where they can actually, if you've got a battery, they can take your battery and say, I need that power now, and it will discharge into the grid the amount of energy you've stored.
Well, and also, right, they just recently saw an email from consumers about them wanting to kind of be able to control your home generator in order to kind of manage load better.
Yeah.
And, so that's part of the same scheme, right? Is if you've got these batteries and home generators out there, and so the utility to be able to control them is it can be very advantageous.
Yeah, I mean, I ran the numbers on that, and all of the profit is going to consumers for that. And
Right.
I really think it's interesting to me that their first offer for the generator program was just $250 a year, and it would only run 20 hours, and very limited. And now they're up to like $500 a year, and they'll pay for portions of the integration, so that they'll have their control. So I don't think it's a particular. So
It's not advantageous to the customer.
Yep.
Dale, go ahead.
So that kind of brings another question to mind of, I hadn't heard about consumers proposing a program to start people's home generators to provide power from natural gas or whatever fuel they're using?
Yeah, yes and no. They don't actually want you to flow electricity onto the grid, because there's in a normal generator, it's not designed to match the utility.
Yeah.
So what they're asking is that those customers basically go off grid. So you say, turn on your generator, disconnect from us for these next 4 or 5 hours, and then just come back to us.
Wow. So the question that brings to mind is, why it seems like all these like Consumers Energy is working a lot more on demand response, and DTE does not. And why doesn't Consumers Energy just build some more power plants, because they can make money building those also? Why is it that, I mean, I like that they're doing demand response. I wish I was in Consumers Energy territory. Why is that? What's different between the two utilities? Why they're taking a different approach?
Yeah, I mean, consumers feels that they want to optimize what they own. Yes, they're building new. They've said we're not building any more new natural gas. Well, that's not really true. They're just going to buy one of their own used plants from in their unregulated space. But actually 5 plants is what they're planning, to close down a couple of coal plants and buy out these other ones. So most of the demand is going to be met with new natural gas power plants. Some of some of it is going to be. I'm going to close out this and stop sharing so I can see all of you guys. We'll see a shift. You know, they're going to close most, all but one of the coal plants by the end of the decade, which I don't think I think they should be going a whole lot faster, but I don't, you know, it is what it is. I think that the demand response is going to happen. There's other tweaks to the system that they're doing, but I'm not seeing as dramatic a change in, you know, they're talking about 500 megawatts a year of new solar. Well, that only gets them to like 3% per year change, which is fine to do things gradually, but it doesn't really get us there very quickly. It doesn't get us there as fast as we need to go in terms of decarbonizing.
You know, from a utility perspective too, right? They're investing more in solar and wind. Obviously, we would like them to do more, but they have to deal with their own the variability, right, of production. And so, how do you deal with that? Their own storage and also demand response programs. They're very, especially demand response, if done properly, can be very cost effective in kind of dealing with variability and also, you know, if there's a power shortage, having a lot of customers that can kind of stop using power is really helpful,
Right.
Especially big
Right.
industry or, you know.
Right. But I think that the thing that we all forget too often is that we own that the state has the largest battery in the world,
Right.
Ludington Pump Storage.
Right.
And that represents about 10 hours of all the electricity needed in the state. So it's not quite big enough to be 100% solar and be able to offset the entire day's worth of generation, but we're getting close. And as we add electric vehicles and other types of storage, we're going to fill in the gaps, and then eventually we'll be able to go to a fully renewable portfolio.
I had no idea that Ludington was that large a capacity. Does that discharge every night then, or how do they run that?
Yes, I mean it's moving that way. It's mostly it is quite the opposite actually. The power plants continue to run in the middle of the night, pump water up the hill, and then during the day when they need it, they run it down the hill and generate power so that they can meet the peak demands of the day.
Okay.
And, you know, the initial impetus for that was that, I mean, they had all these baseload plants like nuclear power plants that run continuously. And so they kind of were thinking, oh my goodness, you know, we got that running all night long. We might as well, you know, pump up the water and then we have it available during the day if we have a peak use. Right. So, I mean, Ludington's been there for a while. Right.
They actually did not build 4 nuclear power plants one nuclear power plant, one big nuclear power plant, 2, because it was only going to run for 4 or 5 hours every day, and that was not going to be economic. So they went and built Ludington Pump Storage so that the nuclear power plants that they were building could run absolutely continuously. And if there's any excess energy, they just start storing it.
Rob, David Arnosti here. I'd like to know if you have time. I understand that you are involved in the Muskego Heights solar project. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I joined a little bit late, so I don't know if you introduced that. Would you give an update on that project?
What was So 760 kW off over 5 of their facilities. So we did City Hall, DPW, the water filtration plant, and then 2 pumping stations. And yeah, that we were able to do a couple of things. Going back to our discussion about rates, after we put solar on those facilities, we were able to switch them to a better rate. So we were able to end up saving almost as much in dollars from the solar as we were from getting them at better rate. And it ends up being something close to $100,000 a year of savings. And we were able to get external financing for the project.
And
So the city didn't even have to come out of
the
pocket.
external financing, had you worked with these investors before? How did you line that up?
I've been I've been courting several investors that buy solar projects over the years, and this was our first with New Energy Equity, and now we've done 3 more since. It's 3 other cities, so we're pretty comfortable with those guys, and they got a good PPA rate that the city is saving money. So it works out well.
I think I read that part of the plan was training local people for work in this area. Did that work out?
Yes. We hired and trained 6 people, 2 of which we still have permanent on our staff. And the others, half of them were able to get permanent construction jobs. That's what happened. I did a consulting job in early 2000s with the Cook County Jail in Chicago, and we did, as part of they were trying to figure out when Obama came in office, he sent an email to all the jails in the country that they should train for green jobs. And the guy who was the sheriff of the Cook County Jail called up my environmental attorney and said, "Hey, Sean, what's a green job?" He says, "I don't know, but I know somebody who might." So he called me and said, "Rob, what's a green job?" I said, "I don't know, but I can figure it out." So I called the lady in charge of employment statistics, and she said, "What's a green job?" And she says, "I don't know, but when you figure it out, let me know." So we ended up doing a study for the Cook County Jail of what jobs could be trained in the average 8-week stay of an inmate or detainee. And as part of that, I developed a solar training program. And the aha moment was when I had 4 guys on the little platform we built, and one of the guys is looking around, and it's like, "What's up?" He says, "I think I could see myself doing this. I never thought of construction as a job that I could do. And it's a whole lot safer than my job." And I'm like, wait a minute. You're on a roof. It's, if you're going to be a roofer or a solar, this is a dangerous job. He says, "No, they don't shoot at me up here." So it dawned on me that there's an opportunity to not just look for people who can end up in the industry, but to get them an opportunity to get into the construction industry. And that there's a whole lot more jobs in the overall construction industry than just solar.
Yes. Thank you very much. Have you given a talk specifically on this project?
On the
Muskegon Heights project?
No.
Okay,
not
well,
yet.
I would like to invite you to, I'm part of a group, a capital area group of Michigan Interfaith Power and Light. We've been doing roughly monthly Zoom webinars. And this sounds like a really exciting and important project. I think it would be great. If you put your email in the chat or something, I'll contact you.
I'll put it in there now.
Thank you very much.
No problem. All right. Any other questions? Why doesn't DTE allow dynamic pricing? That's a good question. I'm not sure. There are some rate structures that I think that both DTE and consumers believe will overly favor them. I mean, the one of the peak demand ones is almost $1 a kilowatt hour during one, very few hours throughout the year at the ultimate peak hours of the year. And if you could dump your battery, you can make, good money on taking advantage of their rates. Rate design, keep in mind, is from the utilities perspective, is a way in which to alter the usage patterns of their customers. It give you a financial reason to change the way you use power. And so these time of use rates, they're trying to convince everybody to not use as much power during the day. They're not thinking so much about solar customers at this point, other than to try to stop people from doing it because they find it as a competition to their business model. But in general, think of rates as a way to incentivize change in habit. And so dynamic pricing has a particular habit that they're trying to change, or usage pattern. And I think that their analysis said, oh, well, solar might be able to make some money off of that one. We're not going to let them do it.
Hey, Rob, do you see any difference in kind of the philosophy and approach, general kind of the way they view the world, consumers' energy compared to DTE? Or are they kind of pretty much have the same, I guess I'd call it worldview?
Oh, they're wildly different. DTE absolutely 100% wants to own everything. And they want to avoid anybody else from competing. And they really are kicking and screaming into the modern age of solar and wind. They are doing absolutely the minimum possible. And then when they have to allow things like net metering or DG, distributed generation, from being installed, they make it as hard as possible. Their interconnection agreements take as long as humanly possible. And then they just make everything as difficult as they can. Consumers under Patty Poppy started to move into the modern age pretty quickly. And they started doing the, they were hopefully going to do more than 500 megawatts a year. So they've pushed that number down now, with that we have a new president of the company, and we're starting to see a shift back away from the modern, back towards closer to what the traditional DTE and other utility patterns. So I'm disappointed with the new regime that's over at consumers, and they are quite a bit more conservative and are going backwards, if you ask me. They're still moving forward much more than DTE, but they're moving much more slowly in the right direction.
Rob, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I agree with you in terms of the utilities making it difficult to add solar. And the question I want to ask you is, they have various categories, category 1, 2, 3. And so category 2 is 150 kW. And so if a facility wants to install 250 kW,
Mhm.
but limit it to 150 kW, it appears as if the utility makes it really difficult for you. They say, export $250 to us or nothing, which seems to be kind of crazy because you could limit how much you want to export to them, but they seem to make it kind of difficult to do that.
Yeah, is this consumers or DTE?
I didn't want to implicate the guilty, but it's DTE.
Okay, yeah, it's the interesting thing is that they may say that, but I think that they have an obligation to buy power. There's both state and federal requirements that they must interconnect you. Now, the value that they associate with that flow of energy to them is determined through the rate cases every year. So it is, we're hoping that we'll have a more favorable valuation of the outflow of energy from this group of commissioners. But I hope it happens more rapidly than just over the next few years. I think that I believe that DTE must interconnect you no matter how big a solar array you want to install. The key is that outflow right now, they can value that outflow usually at wholesale rate, which is about 3 cents. So as long as the power that you're designing for a facility is going to be consumed on site, they have no regulation over that whatsoever. Self-consumed power is not within their control.
So for example, again, if you have that 250 kW and it is above the category two limit, and you say to DTE, yes, I will install the reverse power flow relay. Yes, I will install the controls to limit it to 150. You're saying that they can't tell you, no, you can't do that. You must only install 150 on your site, period. Or
That is correct.
install 250 on your site.
You can install whatever you want. They must interconnect you. The only thing that they can say is that they will pay you less money than or they through the rate cases have come to it'll be in the rate book what price they will pay for the larger system.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the real issue there is what category they're assigning the system to, right? And they're assigning the category based on the size of the inverter,
Right.
not your export limit, right?
Exactly.
That's
And
the crux
that's
of the issue.
That's my issue. My issue is, why are you forcing me to do something for category 3 when I've told you I'm going to limit it to category 2?
Yeah.
But you say, well, your installation or the inverters, you have 250, so therefore we're going to assume that you're category 3.
I think this is a case where statute and practice trail new technology. So, I mean, there didn't used to be the concept of an export limit that you could put in a smart inverter, right?
Exactly.
And so the inverter size was the export limit. Now there's this distinction, but they're not respecting that.
Exactly. And that's,
Right.
I just feel that they are refusing to acknowledge technology at this point.
They do that a
Absolutely.
lot.
And the only way they're going to is if in a rate case, we get them to the Public Service Commission requires them to do something. So I see Dale has his hand up.
Hey, Clayton, with that kind of system, if you have that large a load, what if you made a grid tied system that was 150 and put you in category 2 like you want, and then put like whatever you want, 200 more kilowatts of solar behind an off-grid system, which could also import power from the grid. So this additional solar is just off-grid, and DT doesn't even have to know about it. Then you have 150, and that's all you can export. Except you'd only be exporting what, you know, that 150 array is only going to put out 150, you know, at the peak.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
Otherwise, like what you described earlier would be, it's going to go up to 150 by like 10 a.m. and stay there at 150 all the way until like 3 p.m. and then come back down. You wouldn't necessarily be able to do that, but you could still install as much solar as you want and offset as much of your on-site consumption and still be category 1.
Yeah, I think you could technically do that, but I think that you run the risk of the utility, as I understand the rules, if they decide that you are not following their rules, they have the right to disconnect you.
Yeah, sure. What rules
So-
are you not following though? You just have an off-grid system with inverters and probably a battery.
As far as their rule, the way that the both utilities define a solar array is on a property, the total number of solar panels and inverter capacity. They don't say whether it's on or off grid. They don't say that that's how it's defined in the rate books. So I always look at it from the paranoid, I'm going to get screwed by the utilities perspective, and I'm usually pretty right.
Yeah, I'm sure they would try to do that. I guess, I don't know. I'll find out at some point if they if they try, but it's what you do separate from, you know, if you add more solar and it's on a separate system, all you're doing is reducing your input from the grid, and you're not exporting it. I don't know.
So theoretically, all my landscape lights and my little tiny solar panel from my bubbler in my bird bath could put me over the limit, and they could decide to disconnect me.
Yep, if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think I don't have a system exactly like that, but yeah, I think that would make a nice Public Service Commission complaint case, but
Absolutely, it totally would, but I'm just saying it's that
I agree, yeah.
as they're written, you know, we have problems with sometimes where we have two different users on a same property, and we want to feed two different solar arrays to two different tenants in a building, for instance. The utility says, oh, that's one system. And we're saying it's absolutely not. They're two separate meters. There's two separate customers, but there happens to be one address. And they go, oh, no, that's all the same. I did it in an industrial park where we were feeding different buildings, and they still said it's all one.
And did they get away with that?
Yeah, I mean, we had to end up,
Property?
we ended up having to add storage so that we could self-consume all the power,
Wow.
because it was 3 cents is what they were willing to pay for outflow.
That's too bad.
Well, we've got about 10 more minutes, but we can end early if people don't have any further questions or comments. So any further questions or comments? Okay, I think we can maybe end early. And thank you, Rob. This has been a very, very interesting presentation and discussion. And I'd like to encourage everybody again to, oh, Lisa, do you have a question? Oh, she's clapping. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, just clapping.
Clapping, yes. Yeah. Thank you, Rob, again. And like I mentioned earlier, you know, we have a virtual solar home tour on Saturday, October 16th. So look for information about that. And we'll have our annual meeting, a virtual annual meeting on Saturday, December 4th. So look for further information about both of those events. And thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. And again, thank you, Rob. That was a great presentation. This stuff gets complicated, and it's really helpful to be able to kind of talk it through. So thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.